We are going to start today's session. This is a conversation about Uganda human rights situation in the wake of the elections on January 14th. So 1 week to go. We've been seeing what is happening in Uganda in terms of the violence against political oppositions, journalists, activists, human rights lawyers, and we decided to have this conversation, this panel, where we're going to talk about all these subjects, to talk about the concerns that we have about the situation and actually what can be done. So that's why we are here today, and we are also streaming this on Facebook Live. I'm going to share the link, but after also going to have that on YouTube, so people can follow even after the event. So we have here 4 participants. We're waiting for one more participant, but we're going to start. And I hope that we're going to have a good conversation. And at the end, before the end of the conversation, we're going to have the public ask questions, give suggestions. So we hope that this conversation is going to be constructive, and we're going to talk about some of those issues. So here we have Adote. Adote, do you want to tell people who you are?
Sure. My name is Adeteya Kwe. I'm very happy to be here. I am the Deputy Director for Advocacy and Government Relations for Amnesty International USA.
Thank you so much, Adote. As we wait for other people to join, I see Fiona is setting up her internet. My name is Leonce Byimana. I'm the Executive Director of Task International. We are a nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C., working with torture survivors, including torture survivors from Uganda, people who have been tortured by the Ugandan regime because of their political beliefs. So I organized this event, and I'm really glad we are having this time to discuss. Fiona, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Good evening from Uganda. I think it's good morning, America. My name is Fiona Wall. I'm the President, Ugandan Law Society, and I'm glad to be here. It's also an interesting time in Uganda, and I'm glad that we're discussing the situation in our country.
Thank you so much, Fiona. I appreciate it. Roland, can you hear us? Roland, are you there? Okay. It seems like Roland is working on his internet. Maybe we can start with Fiona to tell us about the general situation in Uganda, especially on the rule of law in Uganda in the last couple of months as we move towards the elections. Fiona?
Thank you very much, Leonce. The last couple of months have not been very peaceful in Uganda. There's been a lot of civil unrest. With particular note, a lot of it started around the primaries, and then actually the whole quarter has had messy primaries that led, NRM primary especially, that led to some violent protests at the on the 19th and 18th of November. The violent protests actually were as a result of the arrest of some candidates at the nomination centers. And this also saw a violent and excessive use of force by the security forces in trying to quell the unrest, which resulted in about in some people losing their lives. Almost 50 people lost their lives as a result. We had a lot of people that were arrested who've been arrested since then. We've had, because of COVID, we've had a very peculiar election season with the Electoral Commission coming out with many regulations and we've also had an overzealous enforcement by the security forces. So you have new regulations, you have populace that's quite is not committed to actually respecting these regulations because they're viewed with suspicion. And then you also see these regulations not being equitably applied across the board. And as a result, because they're not widely accepted, you have a bit of unrest. And then we have the quelling of this unrest by the security forces being excessive. So we have a lot of young people that have been arrested during this time. There's been a disrespect for due process by the forces, so that some of the arrests are illegal, some of the detentions are in places that are not gazetted. We've had cases where even our lawyers, the defenders of human rights, have been caught up in this situation. We've had an increasing clamping down of media rights by the Uganda Communications Commission. We've had members of the media being beaten and also being detained, and we've had some very questionable things happening, and then police denying responsibility, and then later on, the president coming and saying, yes, this happened. So it's been a very bad quarter, I would say. Now January hasn't started off on a very good note, and we're just voting next week. So that just shows you what the environment has been. So there's a general sense of insecurity. There's a general sense of fear. There's a general sense of the legitimacy of this election has been affected greatly by sometimes the lack of transparency in the way things are done, the lack of we have, for instance, this is COVID, so we're asking the candidates have been asked to see if they can protect their members while they're campaigning and everything. And we see candidates almost encouraging people not to use SOPs and not to consider them or even take due regard of their health. And this is a serious issue. And then we see a bit of defiance in the way they're doing it, and it's sending the wrong message to the masses, because we've seen COVID spiked up, almost doubled in December. The COVID infections almost doubled in December alone. And that can tell you, because that was really the climax of the campaigns, and that resulted in the Electoral Commission closing off physical campaigns in some districts. And these were key districts, what were regarded as key districts. And that would mean then that the only channels they have to campaign in are media channels. But then we're also seeing the Communications Commission limiting access to media channels, the police requiring a registration of people that are interested in using which media channels, which the opposition views suspiciously and are afraid of. So it's looked at as intimidation, and then again what they call an inequitable application of the SOPs and the election regulations in a nutshell. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fiona. It's really amazing to see you at work in Uganda in that situation, the work you're doing, speaking out against human rights abuses under the Uganda Law Society, and thank you so much for sharing a little bit about the international. How does the international communities viewing the situation in Uganda, and what are the efforts that are being taken to actually monitor what is happening and do something about it?
Sure. I will, and I'll leave some of the analysis of conditions inside, obviously, to Fiona, who has done a great job, and to Roland. But I think it's safe to say that President Museveni has been able to project Uganda onto the African stage and the global stage in a very, very large way, in that he's seen not only as the elder statesman, or one of the elder statesmen of the continent, by virtue of the length of his tenure, but also by his involvement in many different initiatives, in many different areas of political issues on the continent. Going back, I think going back obviously to his seizure of power and the transformation at that point to from military commander to an elected president, started to sort of create this image of him as a statesman. Uganda's role in supporting the Rwandan Patriotic Front movement to end the genocide in 1994, and sort of being an ally there, again, was perceived as a statesman-like type act. And there's no question that the situation inside Rwanda would have been much worse had there not been some kind of Ugandan support. Whatever outcomes and concerns people may still have, Museveni's stature will increase then. I think the consistent issue that has made President Museveni a global figure has been Uganda's policy on hosting refugees. The country hosts 1.4 million at the end of 2020, which is literally just under 4% of the country's population. And given the crisis of displaced person that Africa has, that is not only a huge act of compassion, but also probably a huge, one of the largest kinds of actions to uphold or at least to comply with international and regional obligations on refugee treatment. In other words, hosting and accepting and taking care of refugees. And then I think probably the other key action, of course, is the role in UN peacekeeping missions. Of course, and that would be the peacekeeping mission in Liberia, the current one in Somalia, and the smaller one in Rwanda. All of those, I think, have created a sense that Uganda and Museveni himself are so important that they are quote unquote essential. He has been able to take this global stature and regional stature to basically almost make the argument that he's Uganda and he's essential for all the things that Uganda is contributing to. And I think on the more questionable side of that, of course, is the involvement in the Central Africa region and the links to security, armed groups in the DRC, the role of potentially support for various political leaders in the DRC. All of those have made them an actor that is seen as critical to discussions, even if not necessarily people having a clear sense of what Uganda wants and what kind of constructive role Uganda would play and Museveni would play in the politics of the region. Now, and this, I think, has certainly led to a reluctance here in the United States to push back on what Fiona has already outlined has been not only a terrible year in terms of rights in Uganda, and especially in the lead up to the elections, but a history of human rights concerns that go back decades. We have not, the attacks on political opponents is not new. This is the game book that the president has used in several previous elections, and it's the one that he will use because there's no accountability. This is the same. There's been a reluctance to push back on his targeting of members of the LGBTQ community because of all of these other reasons where he's seen as an essential player, and that has been a consistent seen here in Washington, and I suspect in other parts of the world where discussions of Uganda's human rights have to have happened. The Ugandan military's partnership and involvement in the war on terror, also seen as strategically important, have also caused a reluctance to take him on and to push back in a way that um, uh, is needed. So we're in the situation now where the calculus has to be redone. Is this uh, uh, tenure of this man, which is rife with abuses, but also, of course, has the issues, the aspects that I mentioned earlier, really one where the international community is not going to push back and say, as Fiona mentioned, that there are serious questions about the credibility of the election and free and fair conditions. And will the wishes of the Ugandan people be actually respected in this process? I think there is a lot at stake here. Many people think that if the person on top controls the country well enough, then there's stability. Um, Arguably, stability only lasts as long as they maintain the preponderance of power. And you only have to look to the north to see what happened in Ethiopia, and what's going on in Ethiopia following the end of following the death of Meles Zenawi, and what's happened since then, to realize that stability, something that may look stable on the outside, that is fundamentally undemocratic or does not have respect for rights, and where there's no ability to express dissent or to articulate and follow alternative political visions of the country, cannot be sustained without force, then there are serious questions there. And I think the reason, another reason, of course, is that Uganda's population, which is a youth population, is dealing with huge economic challenges in terms of unemployment, which are only going to worsen, and which the current government clearly does not have a plan to address, and which will raise the potential for instability. I think you're seeing a turn in the positions here in Washington with the introduction of legislation in the Senate by Senator Robert Menendez, who is probably going to be the next chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Extremely important. He has been consistently raising concerns about what's been going on regarding the election, but he has a history also of commenting on human rights and violations of human rights by the Museveni administration, even prior to this. The resolution that's been introduced is quite clear that he's watching, and that there's going to be consequences. I think we're also looking at a new administration that is or has already articulated the importance of human rights in its foreign policy. The new Assistant Secretary of State nominee, Anthony Blinken, actually commented on the situation in Ethiopia, and there's no reason not to think that they will be watching Uganda very closely. And I think similar stirrings will be coming into the House. We don't know who the chair of the Africa Subcommittee will be, but the current chair, or the previous chair, Karen Bass, has introduced legislation expressing concern about the situations in the country, in Uganda, and concerns about elections and the conditions in which they're being held. So I think this discussion and these elections are coming at a crucial time where there may just be an end to this kind of untouchable status that Museveni has created for himself. So I'll stop there, and I see Roland has been able to rejoin, so I'll turn it over to him if that's okay, Leonce.
Yes, Roland, please go ahead and tell the audience who you are, and please let us know what is the situation in Uganda in terms of human rights.
Good morning, good evening, from wherever you're joining us from. My name is Roland Ebole, and I'm the regional researcher at Amnesty International, focusing on Uganda and Tanzania, two countries that are really tough, and they've just been through an electioneering period. I'm based in Nairobi. After my senior Adote has spoken, then I really want to change the tangent of what I'll say, and to really speak about what we foresee in the next few days before the 14th election. Of course, the president of the Law Society, the Uganda Law Society, has really spoken and articulated the issues well. And going by where we are at the moment, we see that the next few days are going to be very difficult for opposition parties and their members. Just yesterday, we had, the arrest of 48 members of the Bobby Wine team, who are being charged in the court-martial with, possession of arms. Just yesterday, we had the chief of police say that, the attacks or the brutality against journalists has been, mostly to protect them or to really for their safety at this time. And of course, already we are seeing that there is internet shutdown and social media shutdowns. Ugandans have started experiencing that. This is not the first time this is happening. It's been happening in the previous, election period or wherever, where at such times when there are, sensitive political issues happening in Uganda. So we are already seeing Ugandans being, denied the, opportunity to really want to reach out or to communicate. And in the next few days, of course, with the Electoral Commission having, banned campaigns, political campaigns in more than 10 districts, some of which are predominantly opposition stronghold, we are seeing a situation whereby we'll definitely have, conflict between opposition supporters, candidates and authority. Going by what has happened, and the Uganda Law Society president has mentioned the events of November, whereby between 18 and 19 November, we had security forces, including civilians who were armed, we believe, by government, killed 54 persons. This is according to what the president has publicly stated. This could be more because there are some that were badly injured, and later on we've seen cases whereby journalists have been shot for covering opposition events. We are seeing a situation in which the government is really going to be tougher in the next few days, considering that in as much as the opposition leaders have said that they would want their supporters to stay put after voting to protect the votes. The government is also stating that it also, fears, being rigged out by the opposition, or plans to rig it out. So government has asked its forces to stay put and also protect the vote. So the situation is really going to be tough on the election day, having these two groups either conflict or really want to push for this protecting of the vote. The other thing is on election observation or monitoring of this election. This is going to be a different election based on several things. One, this election has been brought forward. Normally elections have happened in February. And towards the end of last year, it shocked many when the announcement was made that these elections will happen on 14 January. One, this really gave people short periods of time to really prepare to monitor the elections, and also to, for organizations, journalists, and people that have done this in the past to really prepare themselves well. Many civil society organizations that have been critical, to the government have, independently observed elections in the past, have been denied, the opportunity or the chance to observe this election. And so we are seeing a situation whereby this is one of the elections whereby we'll have very little observation with regards to the conduct of election. It is estimated that we will only have less than 10% coverage of the 35,000 polling stations in Uganda. In as far as missions, international missions are concerned, we will not have the usual, as an election observation mission, large election observation mission. We will only have diplomatic, diplomatic sources dispatched to monitor the elections, and this will be from the EU. About, I understand, 75 persons. The UK and the US will duplicate this, and this will not be so many, and so we will only have slightly more than 100 of these diplomatic missions looking at what will be happening in the elections. From what I understand, they will not cover more than 17 districts. So you can already see that this will be an election that will definitely not be properly, observed, and we fear that with whatever is already going on, stakes are high in terms of human rights violations. Stakes are high in terms of, how to really get information, considering that there is already internet, shutdown. There is already media and journalists, being blocked. And so what we'd really want to call for, at this time is really for the government to really start thinking, or, end, the waves of, repression, ahead of the elections, and to open these channels whereby, people can really express themselves, assemble peacefully, and associate. By doing that as well, we really need the state to stop using COVID-19 or regulations, regarding COVID-19 as a weapon against freedom of assembly, peaceful assembly especially. We need as well the government to stop, the harassment, the intimidation of civil society organizations. You remember there have been arrests, such as the arrest of Nicholas Opio, a human rights lawyer, a leading human rights lawyer, and the head of chapter for Uganda, and unfreeze bank accounts of several non-governmental organizations that, it has frozen at the pretext that they, are obtaining this money from, proceeds of crime, and with accusations of money laundering. We really must call, and this is, something that we must do. We must call for accountability on what the president has said, 54 people that died in the context of riots or protests. We must call for accountability. We must call for justice. We must call for every state officer that, is found culpable to really be brought before justice. And to end, we must at this point really call for the government of Uganda to, to really, unconditionally undrop charges against, people that have been arrested solely for peaceful assembly, expression, and association. And we are talking about hundreds of them, because yesterday there was 48 arrested, but there are more than 100 that are in custody. I will stop there and maybe get a chance again to come back and speak more.
Thank you so much, Roland, for that information. And, you mentioned something, and I think Fiona also mentioned the killing of more than 50 people in the last couple of weeks. you know, Fiona, as the president of the Uganda Law Society, do you see people being prosecuted for those you know, innocent people deaths? Is there any effort to pursue or to see who was responsible for the killings of the population in those last weeks? Fiona, you're muted.
We have been engaging the forces to ask them to take disciplinary action, because when we held them to account for the killings, some of the statements that came out were that some of these people were reckless. It's not a plan to shoot live rounds into crowds. They were supposed to have shot them in the air to disperse the crowds, not to harm the people. So we called for the disciplinary action to be done, and they gave us, you know, vague commitments on this and that. So as the Law Society, we have decided to proceed with private prosecutions. Unfortunately, our invitation to the masses to give us evidence has not been very forthcoming. But this is something that we're asking for. However, if you'll allow me to just make a small observation from what the previous speakers said, and what I think is causing where we are, because Adate gave a very good background of what Uganda is viewed as internationally, and maybe why, but I think that Uganda has become a bit schizophrenic. In nature, every election cycle, this happens. This is not new, and that's very unfortunate. And I also feel that the development partners and the international community has also become schizophrenic in the way they behave around election cycles, because what happens is that during the elections, everybody's concerned, everybody's everybody's up in arms. We say so many things, and then elections end, and then there's this whole period that everybody's talking about election reforms. But I feel that sometimes the international community stops there, and then we do not see enough pressure and enough commitment, because for the past 5 years, we've been talking about electoral reforms. We've been talking about strengthening the Electoral Commission. We've been talking about increased accountability, especially in the judiciary, because one of the most frustrating things about our elections is that the petition period is very long for some of these cases. As we speak, there's some cases from the last election that have not been resolved. So what does that mean justice-wise? So because everybody seems to think we have the attention span of a young person on social media when it comes to election cycle in Uganda, I feel that the forces and the country, the government feels this shall pass, you know. So I feel that it's a bit hypocritical for us to come and make so many judgments at this point. And I think that the only way we're going to be able to do anything tangible and anything different is to come out with a commitment, because Roland has talked about the policies that are coming up and how the US foreign policy is changing and all this. But you see, we need to see that translate into some real support towards, for instance, electoral reforms. Because I feel that since around 2005, this has been the same conversation. So I just thought, sorry, I just thought that I'd sort of loop in because sometimes I think right now we're dealing with the symptoms. We're dealing with the symptoms of not dealing with the real cause. And the real cause here is that, yes, human rights violations, pressure, the stress, the people dealing with each other, COVID, these are peculiarities for now. But the real cause of why we are here is because we've not been committed strategy-wise to electoral reforms. And we did not have enough external and internal pressure to do this. And even we as the Law Society are responsible partly for this. So I just thought that we would look at that as well. If we're looking at resolutions going forward. The other thing also, I feel that there's some knee-jerk reactions we keep making, because another problem that I've viewed here has been the absence of, or the silence, or the inaction of the Electoral Commission, because just what happened on the 19th and 18th should have been enough to bring to cause the Electoral Commission to bring everybody on table, make new regulations, bring certain things to book, and also call for the discipline of whoever did this, accountability for whoever contributed to these murders. Because for the Electoral Commission chairman to have this blood on his hands during his watch is a big issue, and we've not seen any action from that side. And for me, I feel that that is the one body that's constitutionally created to deal with these issues. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
Leonce, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. And thank you so much. You know, yesterday, as also Roland mentioned, I was following the head of police, Okot Ochola, when he was saying that during the elections, the police and the army, they're ready to crush anyone who is going to, you know, cause chaos, and in the way that they're going to I don't remember the words, that they're going to regret that their mother brought them to earth. So that is a very, very strong statement from coming from the state of the head of the police. I think the head of the military say the same. The head of the prison say that they have enough space for every Ugandan. That's a really, really strong statement. So Roland, this question comes to you. What is the worst case scenario moving forward towards the elections in a week?
Thank you so much for the question, and I alluded to it when I mentioned that you know, the clash that we may expect on the election day itself, in terms of you know, people staying behind to protect the votes, and definitely if opposition supporters, especially Bobi Wine supporters, stay behind and authorities you know, try to force them to, you know, leave the polling stations, then definitely we will see some form of a clash. So we might expect some form of violence, and this we really want to call that the government should do everything to really avert that. After the election day, of course, we are talking about expecting results, and as the results coming, seeing a situation whereby this is an election where President Museveni, I would say, you know, the stakes are high, and chances are that he is really concerned about, you know, the kind of popularity that opposition politicians, especially Bobi Wine, has. And so a situation whereby either Bobi Wine supporters may reject the results, or the president himself may refuse, you know, the results if he loses. Also, this is what I think is that in such highly contested elections, it's very hard to manipulate the results. It really takes you know, a lot of efforts, a lot of mathematics to manipulate results whereby, you know, competition is high. And so a situation whereby you know, opposition politicians will definitely see some form of you know, irregularities, or you know, will see efforts or you know, electoral commission trying to you know, manipulate results, and they may perceive it may be you know, what happens, it may be what they think, but definitely we see a situation whereby after elections things would actually be you know, be bad. So again, for us is to call on the government to really do everything within its powers, and this is putting human rights considerations ahead of everything in terms of trying to prevent a situation whereby the country goes into violence. Because once this happens, then we are talking about, a massive, human rights violation. So let us work knowing that things may go bad on the election day and after the elections.
Thank you so much, Roland. We have Aaron Chiza, who just joined. Aaron is a human rights lawyer, also is a member of Uganda Law Society, also in charge of rule of law at Uganda Law Society. Aaron, I've worked with Aaron a lot. He represents many torture survivors in Uganda, many people who are under custody of, the military, the police. Aaron, what do you think is going to be the role of the military in these coming elections? Because I know that not only the police but the military is ready to do whatever they're going to be asked to do by the president. What are your fears? What are your concerns moving forward with the involvement of the military in this election?
The military is already deeply involved in the electoral process, and we expect, not just suspect, we expect an intensification of the role of the military in the electoral processes, especially on election day and going forward in the immediate aftermath of the election. You will want to remember that military generals have been appointed to, in this period, basically to take charge of the city. You want to know that the police has many directors who have a military background. So it has been a militarized election that can only worsen and will continue after the election. And I think the question was so simple, that's the answer.
Thank you, Kakwen. Thank you, Aaron. Do you have something you want to add to what we've been discussing about the accountability of, all these human rights abusers moving forward?
Yeah, I think the international community, I want to echo the words of Fiona, that the international community cannot afford to play usual game, usual ball. This is a different situation, and we need new answers. We are aware, we have always agreed that there is a crackdown on not just opposition, but on civil society. So can we see creative ways of supporting civil society, professional organizations like Law Society, people who can push back against oppression and support a repressed opposition? Can we see creative ways of guaranteeing that Ugandans have social media? Because it is written on the wall that they are going to switch off social media or even the entire internet. So how are we being helped by the international community or partners of Uganda, development partners and other people who love Uganda, to ensure that actually when the state moves to create an internet shutdown, blackout, then we have a technological response which is accessible to all Ugandans, so that the state is failed in that effort? Because we have seen all along frustrating the monitoring of the elections. First of all, frustrating accrediting of election observers, and also stopping journalists from covering elections, beating them in the process, trying to license them afresh. And so there is a lack of transparency that can only continue. And on election day, we expect social media or the entire internet platform to go on. So we need help from our partners in the civil society. And of course, can we have how do we handle the impunity? You see the police officer, the head of the police himself is saying that we are going to beat you. We are going to beat you. That's the head of police. So the question you are asking, Fiona, whether you expect prosecution, no, I don't expect prosecution from an investigator or prosecutor who is already showing signs. I think that's what I would want to say in summary, unless there's a specific question.
Yeah, just for one minute, Kiza, do you want to continue? There's someone, his name is Stuart Russell. He's worked with the International Association of People's Lawyers. He asked to Aaron and to Fiona, what can lawyers outside of Uganda do to support our embedded Ugandan colleagues?
There are many things that the international community lawyers can do. First of all, like some of them did, for example, Stuart Russell and others really, of when there is a lawyer being threatened, arrested, to ensure that this gets to international stage, the solidarity is very important, but also using the experiences and maybe special occasions to ensure that international mechanisms that can be triggered are triggered or augmented in partnership with the local lawyers to ensure that because impunity reigns partly because the judiciary is co-opted like other institutions of the state. So alternatives to national remedies would help us solve some injustice that is related to elections, and that's where international lawyers can come in to help local lawyers and work together to do that. And of course, funding. I mean, funding is a key thing. I'm not sure international lawyers have the money, but probably they may know where local lawyers could get some funding. Yes.
Fiona, do you want to add to that? Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to thank Stuart Russell and everybody else who's been helping. It's been really, I think, actually, the Nicholas Appeal incident showed what international lawyers and partners could do, and I think then we need to have it done strategically, more long term. But also, again, I believe in dealing with things that will actually give us long-term results and not just dealing with symptoms. So it would be very good for us to be able to work with them to see how we can put the right pressure, especially on reform, the right pressure on institutionalization of constitutionalism and rule of law, especially with the Electoral Commission, with even Parliament during this time has been quite silent, and yet they're going to be the beneficiaries. And some of the crimes that were committed, especially in the primaries, were by parliamentarians. So I think that I would encourage us to have closer dialogue with the external lawyers, so that we can come up with tangible strategies that will not have us in the same space in 5 years.
Thank you so much, Fiona. I'm going to turn to very quickly before we start to have questions from the audience. You know, we've been talking about the international community. There are many venues for prosecution of these crimes that are happening. You know, there's the ICC. There are other provisions provided by the U.S. government and other bodies like the European Union. So we are very, very ready to work with the Ugandan community, Ugandan lawyers and activists. We want to work with the citizen journalists. We want citizens to provide information on what is happening on the field, so that we, as international community, could do something about it. If I understand that it is very hard for the Ugandan courts to prosecute the Ugandan authorities by what they're doing. So, Adote, do you want to speak very quickly on what could be done by international community to actually not address only the symptoms, but also the cause of the situation? Very quick.
Sure. And I think Fiona actually put it perfectly, that the international community has got to stop being schizophrenic about how it approaches Uganda. Progress on developments, adherence to international and regional obligations on refugees does not have to come and must not be allowed to be, quote unquote, in competition, put into conflict with respecting democracy and human rights. They have to be pursued together. And this is where groups like ours have to basically push our governments to really commit themselves to supporting groups and lawyers, civil society organizations, journalists consistently. And I think this is something that that Amnesty has been pushing on. We're pushing, trying to sort of get as other organizations are doing, our input into the incoming Biden administration staff people to sort of say, listen, the last 4 years, the United States has been a negative actor on human rights adherence globally, and that needs to change. This new administration needs to reiterate that the United States will pay attention and will expect to see human rights be respected and upheld, and that relationships will depend on that. And that the United States itself has got to mirror that kind of behavior so that there's no, space for people to say, well, that's hypocritical or something like that. I think that Aaron and Fiona and Roland have already said this week is going to be terrible. I mean, it's bad enough, but this week we have to figure out how not to let the light go completely off on what's going on inside the country so that the worst is not allowed to be done in darkness. And so that means that, we've got to sort of figure out ways to share information to, I see in the chat that someone says that they have information about arrests and roundups already happening. We need to basically have this information sent to rights groups and to the lawyers in Uganda so that we have a record of who's been detained or who's disappeared. But we also need to have the information about who is doing it, so that we can verify information so that when we do have the opportunity to say, well, this particular unit is doing something in this particular town or community, or this is what happened on such and such a date. We have the documentation from different places to say, this is fact. This is not, quote unquote, fake news. And what does this mean for this, not only for the election, but also for Uganda going forward? I do think, Leonce, that you've already mentioned accountability outside of Uganda. And this is where I will be the first one to say that Amnesty has been already been pushing both the nominees for the Biden administration as well as Congress to basically change the US posture towards the International Criminal Court. That is not the only venue, but it's an important one because the Trump administration's hostility and undermining of the International Criminal Court has severely impacted its ability to basically support justice and accountability in Uganda. That needs to be changed. So that's something that we can do from the US, but you also need to have similar and consistent pressure from the European Union and other Ugandan allies, other governments that are allies. But I guess the most important is how do we make sure that we do not let the internet, a potential internet blackout, really throw darkness over the next couple of days. Those are some thoughts.
Adote, very quickly, do you think the African Union will have something to do in this coming election? Kind of, what will be the role of African Union, if you have an idea about that?
I think there are concerns with the African Union's ability to stick to principle and to live up and to uphold the letter of the African Union Charter. But I think it's actually as important to force them to confront it. In other words, we can't, even if we have doubts about what they'll do, they need to be held accountable and they need to be challenged to do the right thing. So I think, I see one comment that's saying it's an exercise in futility. It may be. That doesn't mean that they get a free pass. That's not how you change governments. That's not how you change policy and practice. You have to embarrass them. You have to highlight the behavior. If we're going to turn this around and basically get to the point where election observers are truly credible, they are independent, and they say, no, this was not free and fair, then not going to them is not the right strategy. And I'll just say one thing. Just look at what the United States has gone through here in terms of challenges to elections. This is not a uniquely African problem. So don't underestimate it. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to let Leonce, if it's okay with you, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Uganda Law Society are actually official election observers now. We've been accredited. However, I think what the international community could do is maybe look into, because you see, where everybody's going to be the observers are going to prepare reports and all this, but I think we would need to look at, for instance, we need to plan for post-election as well. How are we going to handle it? How can we be more united and create a multifaceted approach to the post-election period? See the enforcement of the recommendations and actually see a different Uganda applying these reforms in 2025. And I think that 2026, I think that right now, what we risk seeing is different reports saying different things, and nobody being able to stand up to them. And in the midst of all that confusion, there'll probably only be one person shining, and that is the person maybe who will have won. And it will not matter the legitimacy of the election being affected as long as the reports are not synchronized and speaking the same language. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying. So I think that the election observation, I know that Roland listed quite the issues that are around election observations around this time, but I think that we should make the best of what we have, work with those that are observing. Those that have been denied the right to observe can push their resources or their efforts toward supporting those that are observing, so that we actually have the same kind of energy around observation.
Thank you so much, Fiona. We're almost at the end of this panel, but I want to, Roland, do you want to elaborate a little bit? What is, looking at what may happen in the upcoming week or 2 weeks, what could be done? What could the community, the citizens, in Uganda, what could people do to document live what is going to be happening in a way that we could have evidence of violence that we could actually use for the future prosecution? Do you have any mechanism in mind?
Yes, thank you very much. One is there are so many lawyers that are really and organizations that are going to monitor, human rights violations and would be reporting to us and so many other partners that they do have. With such times when internet shutdown is imminent and the social media shutdown is imminent, of course, there are technologies that these organizations can use to remain in communication. And so we are looking at really, getting to support any organization that is thinking about doing such. Of course, we have listed organizations that are doing observation. It may be limited, as I mentioned. Observation may only cover 10% of the polling stations or where elections will be happening. Of course, we definitely will be relying on getting information from these groups. And most definitely for us as an organization that does research, advocacy, and campaigns, we will be, working with our monitors on the ground to really get as much information as we can to verify them. We have, digital verification teams at this time when, there is a lot of, there is a lot of technology that can really, try and mess up information. So we will also be doing that so that, again, we communicate in a credible manner. We speak in a credible way. And so to just end is to really encourage, Ugandans, in as much as we have shortcomings within all these institutions that you're mentioning, the AU. I mentioned that in the chat that IGAD met with the Electoral Commission yesterday, and they may be part of the observation mission. And of course, people will be looking at that, in a skeptical way. Of course, we know what happened in the US, and again, people, thinking that there is no moral authority for the US to really, lecture and all that. But again, we have to really continue documenting what is happening, because with documentation, we then get, the evidence that we can use, even in future to really follow and seek justice. And that is what we are here about. We are here about, getting to not only make sure that elections go in the right way, but also if they go in the wrong way, what do we do for the future? And to Fiona, and especially, Aaron Kiza, is that, Uganda has really, gotten, away with a lot of things, and it is up to us to really now think through the strategies to ensure that this does not happen in future. Somebody else asked about what are we going to do in terms of refugee issues, what are we going to do in terms of, making sure that, the next government, if opposition takes, wins, what they will do in
Yeah, I think Roland has an issue with the internet, but thank you, Roland. Before we end, I wanted to share my email. If you're in the audience and you want to ask further questions, or if you have information about abusers in Uganda, please send it my way. Also, if you need any contact for any of the panelists, we could talk about that as well. But before we end, Chiza, I don't want to end without having a perspective of the victims, because I know that the victims have not only been politicians. I remember I was talking to someone who is in touch with the mother of Amos, a 15-year-old who was killed, I think 4 weeks ago, by the military. I know Kakwenza, one of your clients, who was tortured 3 times in the hands of the military in a basement prison. So what is the message from the victim? I think we've been talking about numbers, but I know those people personally who have been harmed by the government. What is the message before we close this session?
The message from the victims is that they want this whole to end. They want this. They don't want repetition. People who have been tortured, to whether the Mbuya or Chireka, they don't want to go there again. But they also left there many other more victims who are in illegal detention. Most of them, they would want them to come out, because like the ones who are detained with Nicholas, they helped us to get more people. We have got more than 2 out, but there are more that the government is still denying have. So basically, they don't want repetition of what is happening. They want justice, and they want all of this ended. If we can get off protecting them, that's the better. I think those are the 3 simple things.
Thank you so much. We're past the time, but this was really great to have everyone. We were not able to respond to all the questions, but we're going to plan for more after this. I think we are planning to maybe have something on the day of the elections or after the elections, according to, to see how things are going. But I shared my email. If you have any question or feedback, please send to me any feedback, and I will relay to the panelists. Again, thank you so much for all the activists, all the lawyers on the field, citizens of Uganda. We really wish you a good elections, hopefully. So, and let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonce.
Thank you.